let's talk a little bit about poetry. This is something that I think has confused people because Sonlight does a really good job in our instructor's guides of giving you notes on how to teach everything, but our poetry in the past has had less of those notes in the instructor's guides or explanation about how to use it. And so this again is kind of another customer feedback change that we're making. But what are we going to do to poetry to update it?
Right. Well, our thought about poetry is we want students to be exposed to it. We want them to hear it and listen to the sound of it and just enjoy it. So that's kind of the reason that we didn't have as many notes. We didn't want people to be bogged down. We didn't want them to feel like it was drudgery. So we just want people to delight in it. I know a lot of people use poetry as their special time. They make it special. They may have a tea party and read their poetry at that point. But we really just still want people to delight in poetry and hear it and be exposed to it. So by adding these notes, please don't think that we want you to make it a large study, but we wanted to add some helps to some people. I know it's one of those things that people feel is sometimes not approachable, or they don't feel confident in how to talk about it, or they want some direction on where to go. And so that's what we're doing here. We're completing out our note in several levels. We're adding notes so that you just have a place to start. You don't have to use them. If you still just want to delight in the poems, that's wonderful. That's what we want. But if you want a place to start and to talk about the poetry and talk about what's there and start to analyze it and look at it in a different light, we're adding notes that will help you do that. We're adding information about maybe the author who wrote it, what the time period was about, kind of the situation they wrote it in. We're adding in notes about if there's vocabulary words or unfamiliar words. We're listing those so that you have that information if you want to look at it. We're adding terms that are generally used in poetry, like alliteration and personification and those kinds of things, so that you're familiar with that as you get it later in the years when you do analyze poetry in a more rigorous way. Pointing out the various forms of poetry, if it's a limerick, if it's a haiku, a sonnet, a narrative verse, a lyric poem, a ballad, like all of those things that poetry takes on different forms. And so we're just pointing those out and looking at it just so that you're aware of it as you go forward and know that if you're writing poetry, you can try this format, that kind of thing. We're pointing out if there's a rhyming scheme that happens with it. Often the rhyme is very interesting, or the pattern, or what is that word? When it has different stresses on the syllable.
That iambic pentameter?
Yeah, if it has a format like that. So we're pointing those things out. It's not meant to be anything that you're quizzing your kids on or stressing, or it's mostly in the early grades. We just want you to hear it and be exposed to it. We do have a program in high school that you look at. Sound and Sense is a great book to analyze poetry, and we do go through all of those things, and we do add those things to high school. But in the younger years, we really just want you to be exposed to it. We've also added in some notes if there is a spot or a controversial topic that we want to give you to help you think about it from a Christian perspective. Like, how do we respond to this? What do we really believe about how people are? Those kinds of things. So we're just adding in helps for people if they want them. So honestly, we still want you to love poetry, delight in it, just hear it and experience it. But this is to help you explore it a little bit more if you'd like to.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that you make about any of our instructors' guide, that they're a guide for you and a reference. You mentioned vocabulary, and I know that has saved me many times when my child's like, what does that word mean? And now I don't have to look it up because it's right there in my instructor's guide. But not having people take it on as a big stressful, I need to quiz my first grader on what form of poem this is or anything like that. But it really is for your reference if you want to teach those things, if you need more. But also, if you just want to read the poem and enjoy it, you can too. So I think that's a great point to make there, that we definitely don't want to stress anyone out or make them think they have to take on, a lot more. We're just, again, making it easier for them to explain those things if they'd like to.